Hello, this is Nagina Abdullah, and today I am here with Dr. Joan Ifland. We're going to be talking about new science and how it gives us these three weight loss breakthroughs. And it's the reasons that you have cravings that are keeping you stuck. And let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Ifland. Dr. Ifland has been creating breakthroughs in recovery from food addiction from 1999 with her first popular book to now, and recently in 2018 when she wrote her textbook Processed Food Addiction: Foundations, Assessment, and Recovery. She's been selected by her expertise by Oprah Winfrey Network, Martha Stewart Wedding Magazine, Fortune Magazine, and US News and World Report. She founded the online addiction reset community, ARC, in 2018, foodaddictionreset.com. The Facebook group Food Addiction Education and foodaddictionresources.com provide free support. Dr. Ifland is the lead author of the first scholarly description of processed food addiction and definition of addictive foods. Dr. Ifland earned her PhD in addictive nutrition at Union Institute and University, her MBA at Stanford Business School, and her BA in economics and political science at Oberlin College. She currently resides in Seattle. Welcome, Dr. Joan. How are you today? And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Nagina. I am just so glad to be here.
Oh,
Nagina, I'm
oh
so sorry,
yes.
Nagina. Thanks, Nagina.
Absolutely. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. And it's something that it can feel like it can be a cycle that someone is in when they are craving food, when they want to get healthier, when they want to make the right choices, but they're stuck in this craving cycle. And so we're going to talk about the relationship to addiction. We're going to talk about how to overcome, some of the feelings that people may be having. And even, one of the things we're going to get started with in a moment is how to actually achieve weight loss while having cravings, while feeling like you have something that is so hard to break. So we're going to get into this now. Before we start this discussion, I'd love for you to talk to us, Dr. Joan, about what really brought you to become interested and to specialize in addiction related to food.
Okay, so it really started January 18th, 1996. I had given up sugar and flour to lose weight, and I was in a group of people doing this with me. And so I gave up sugar and flour on January 1st, 1996. And all these other things started happening. Yes, I loved it. The bloating stopped, the craving stopped. I was never hungry. I was eating a lot of food, it seemed to me, because I had been a restricted calorie dieter, which had ended up causing me to gain a lot of weight. So I was eating all this food and I was still losing 2 pounds a week. So that was the first week, and then the allergies got better, and a lifelong sinus infection went away. And I thought, wow. And then I lost another 2 pounds that week. And then the third week, I was standing in my kitchen. This was January 18th. It was a Thursday. And I thought to myself, wow, I haven't yelled at my family in 3 weeks. And I didn't know that sugars and flours were causing me to be angry, to rage, to criticize my family, to be anxious, to feel like nothing was ever good enough. Had a huge emotional impact. And now, that was 27 and a half years ago, I have done a PhD in the field. I've written the textbook for the field. I know exactly what was happening. And I adopted this. I said, everybody should know that processed foods cause these cravings. It is the processed foods that are fattening. It is the processed foods that are putting on the weight. But I also have a business background, as Nagina mentioned. I have a Stanford MBA. I study business models, and there is an addiction, I call it now a craving business model. When you have a worthless product, how are you going to sell a worthless product? Oh, well, you can hire a neurologist to go in and through messaging and by hiding addictive substances in the product, you can make somebody's brain crave without their cooperation, their knowledge, their acceptance, no, you just message, hide sugar, flour, gluten, dairy, excessive salt, excessive fat, caffeine, food additives, hide it in the product, make the product look like it's a lot of fun, and you can addict somebody. What does that mean? You can create those overwhelming cravings without them ever agreeing. And that's what's happened to us by the millions.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean that, and so this really helps to explain that it's beyond our control in many situations, and it's more about understanding the foods that you're putting in your body and understanding what's happening to you. And many of us have read a lot about foods, for example, like Doritos, where it's very scientific about how there's just the right amount of salty, just the right amount of sweet that keeps you literally not being able to just stop at one chip. You just want more and more fat, like all of the combinations of what your brain is just wanting and asking more of. So yes,
So,
this very
Dana, I
interesting.
just want to do a little reframe here. You can control this. Once you know what is being done to you, and you know how the food scientists are doing it to you, you can take evasive action and you can build a system of protection. Yes, it takes some training, it takes some skill building, and you have to have a lot of confidence, because often people you love are passing on this messaging. They're passing on triggers. They are triggers. So the food industry has not just trained us to have these intense cravings, they've trained everybody around us, and now those people are capable of triggering cravings in us.
Okay. No, that is so empowering, and it's so true. It can feel like it's out of your control, when you're
Yes.
having those cravings, but it's actually about this education and learning what to do about it, and then being able to overcome it. It's very true. You really can get over it. So once you're knowledgeable about what's
Yeah.
happening. So
Yeah.
yes. So let's start there. I really want to dig into, you have done a lot of research and a lot of work around understanding what cravings really are and
Hmm.
what they're telling us. So
Hmm.
can you tell us a little bit, given that there are, a massive percentage of Americans that are obese and or overweight, what can you talk to us about what cravings mean, and what is the relationship between this high level of people that are obese or overweight, and the fact that there's so much, the fact that cravings and processed food are such a big part of our society.
Yes. Okay. Nagina, you've just put your finger right on the most important piece of our conversation today, which is what the heck's going on in my brain? And I want everybody to know this is a mechanical problem. And here's the core thing that's going on in your brain, which once you know how to control this, and Nagina's right, this is about skill building and training. Once you know how to control this piece, your life will change because you'll have control of your food. There's the thing that's going on that creates the craving is that you have four pathways in the brain that are hyper producing craving chemicals. And that's it. That's it. This is why the country is so sick. This is why the country is so overweight. It's because you have dopamine, serotonin, opioid, and cannabinoid pathways that are pumping out a lot of craving chemicals, neurotransmitters. Now, with these, when in advanced cravings, now you got to remember this all started when the tobacco industry is expert at creating cravings for nicotine. They came into processed foods. They bought Kraft, Nabisco, and General Foods in 3 short years, 1985 to 1988. They had this incredibly fattening, addictive substance, brand new, high fructose corn syrup. And they proceeded to use the tobacco craving business model in processed foods. This is
Wow.
not your fault. So that's this the big thing to take away from this conversation. This is not your fault. This is something that was done to you deliberately for profit. A lot of years I thought, why do I have this prestigious Stanford MBA? And now I know why, because I look at business models. When you have a worthless product, it has no value. In fact, it's quite destructive. The only way you can sell that product is by creating these artificial cravings, training those pathways to pump out floods of craving neurotransmitters, and then create delusion around the product. So if you're the kind of expert who can make people think that cigarettes are sexy, cigarettes are like the complete opposite of sexy. They smell disgusting and just get away from me. But that's what the tobacco industry was capable of doing. Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart smoking and looking so sexy. Well, they've done the same thing with processed foods. Processed foods taste disgusting unless you have cravings for them. Like, the old tobacco jingle, Winston tastes good like a cigarette should. I'll bet a lot of people can sing that jingle. Winston tastes good like a cigarette should. Oh my gosh, cigarettes taste disgusting. But if you have cravings for them, if these pathways associate getting high with that substance, they'll make it taste good. And that's what happens with processed foods. They taste disgusting unless you have cravings for them. Okay, so now you have this situation. You have the food industry has trained your reward. These are the reward pathways, the pleasure pathways. They are the addiction pathways as well. Because what happens is you get this surge. That's what an addictive substance does. It's able to trigger those brain cells into a surge, a high, a flood of these brain chemicals. And boy, you feel so good. But those cells are not designed to sustain that. So you crash. And it hurts. The crash hurts. The brain cell is depleted. It's tired. It's exhausted. It can't put out one more pleasure. It can't put out one more message of happiness. It can't put out one more message that life is good. That's depression. That's anxiety. That's irritability. That's fear. That's terror. That's panic. Because your brain cells aren't doing that. Okay. That's a mechanical issue. That you have brain cells that are now trained to push, 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 and then crash. All right. So all you have to do, and this is where a lifetime of training comes in, is you have to take away the stimulation that pushes those cells into that high, which is then followed by a crash. Because in the crash, of course, is where the compulsion comes. You feel terrible, but you know that these substances could make you feel better. And there you are. You've sworn you're going to have a good day of eating, and by 10 o'clock, you're in front of the vending machines. That's because you've been manipulated into a crash.
Yeah, wow. And that's exactly what happens to many, many people is that they wake up, with the best intentions of treating themselves well and giving themselves a healthy day. And it could be mid-afternoon, it could be late night, or in any time in between where it just doesn't seem possible to keep going. And yes, it is those cravings that are overwhelming. So, okay, so for people that are facing this, which is so many millions of people facing this dilemma of cravings versus being healthy, but it feels like no matter how much they try, it keeps getting the best of them. How can you, is it possible to get healthier with cravings? What do cravings mean? Does it mean something emotionally beyond the chemical part? And how do you differentiate, which one is more, which one is leading us in that direction we don't want to go in? But how can someone achieve weight loss while having these cravings, while the processed food industry is so huge that it's so difficult to get through it and around it?
Okay. Nagina, you are just an amazing interviewer. You know exactly which questions to go to. So this is the next chapter in this story, which is, can emotions trigger cravings? Can emotions trigger that flood of dopamine and serotonin and opioids and cannabinoids? Absolutely. So this is something that's quite beautiful about the brain. It's exquisite. Whoever created us, whatever your beliefs are around that, they created us with deep compassion. This is going to blow your socks off. So when we have stress, the brain attempts to comfort us by releasing those pleasure chemicals. So when we get a surge of adrenaline or cortisol, when somebody yells at us, when we don't get enough sleep, when we're late for work, when we're stuck in traffic, when our kids are sick, when we're sick, when somebody just won't settle down, when a coworker is sick and they pile all their work on you, or they're just incapable and you have to cover for them. There are hundreds, probably thousands of things that can happen in any given day. And in our country, we live in a toxic culture. They happen all the time. Now, the food industry and the entertainment industry know this. So they know if they can stress you, your brain is going to compensate for that stress by activating these feel-good chemicals. So there's a very tight dance between the feel-good brain pathways and the stress pathways. There's a pathway called the corticotropin releasing factor. What does it do? It activates your adrenal glands. Now, here's how the dance works. You feel bad, you're stressed out. The brain makes you feel better by releasing craving chemicals. Oh, not craving chemicals, pleasure chemicals to make you feel better. But they are craving chemicals and you experiencing them as cravings. So people have names for this. They call it stress eating, they call it emotional eating. And oh, here's the answer. Let's look at your childhood issues. Not. Your brain is already in quite a bit of pain because the brain is not designed to have these floods and it crashes of pleasure chemicals. It's not designed to have adrenaline released into your body 20 times a day, because there's the other half of the dance. Is when you've seen a food advertisement or you've gotten into one of these crashes. Sorry, when you've seen a food advertisement or you're seeking these foods and you're high, you're in the high phase, guess what? The body will try to bring you back down to earth. Because if you're high, so you're an evolutionist or a creationist, if you're high, you could be attacked by a neighboring tribe, you could be attacked by a wild animal, you could be too high to find food, or you might not notice that it's beginning to hail, you might not be able to find, you're incapacitated. When you're that high, you're incapacitated. And your survival mechanism will say, oh, you got to come back down to earth. You got to be protecting yourself. How does it do that? It releases adrenaline and corticosterol. So there's a tight dance here, and people who have been given overweight. You did not create overweight. You did not create obesity. It was given to you for profit. So people who have been given overweight by these corporations, they're stuck in this terrible dance of, I feel pleasure, oh, compensate by more stress. Oh, I'm feeling stress, oh, compensate by more cravings. It's terrible. It's a prison of competing brain chemicals. So I get one other question all the time. Nagina, if you want me to talk about this, I will. Why? I know better. I should be able to stop. So if you want me to go ahead and explain what that is. I can do that.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Because that's the language that people are saying to themselves. Like, and also the fact that like I should know how to do this by myself. I should be stronger. And it comes to willpower a lot, which, knowing how this and seeing so many people lose weight and it's like it's not about willpower because willpower is based, cravings are going to get the best of you if you're going to rely on
Mhm.
willpower. So yes, I would love for you to go into that a little bit more.
I think you just nailed that. That a lot of people now are creating stress because the culture, it's profitable for the culture to tell you that this is your fault and you should do better and you should have more willpower. If only you would just move, and exercise and eat better.
That's so
Okay,
true. Yeah.
this is why that is total gaslighting. This is why that is a form of psychological abuse and why it's just an incredible, terrible lie. It's not true. So here's what's happening. You've got this dance going on back in your head between the craving pathways and the stress pathways. It uses up a lot of blood flow. That blood flow is being pulled away from the frontal lobe. Well, the frontal lobe is where you have control. So when people say, "Oh, you should have more control," no, I should not. It's ridiculous and it's hurtful for you to tell me I should have more control when in fact there's not enough blood in my frontal lobe to have control. So just go away. I don't want to listen to you anymore.
That's a
So
good
what's in the
response.
frontal lobe?
Yes.
What's in the frontal lobe that gives you control? You have attention span is in the frontal lobe. This is why we have epidemics of attention deficit. Learning is in the frontal lobe. And that's why we have an epidemic of learning, quote unquote, learning difficulties. They're not learning difficulties. The blood flow is being pulled away from the cells into the back of into the midbrain. You have problem solving in the frontal lobe. And believe me, if you're not going to eat processed foods in the United States of America or anywhere in North America or Europe or anywhere in the world these days, you've got to be able to solve problems because in the United States, for example, 73% of what people eat is processed foods. So finding the other 23% is really a big challenge. You've got to be able to solve problems. You've got to be able to make good decisions. This is what's so diabolical about this. Oh, make better decisions. Oh, if you just made better decisions, if you made better choices. Guess what? The brain cells that make better choices are in the frontal lobe and they're not getting blood supply. They have crashed. Memory is in the frontal lobe. So when you wake up from depleted pleasure cells and finally the stress cells are also depleted and you wake up and you're getting blood flow back to your frontal lobe and say, why did I do that? Well, because the cells that say, that hurts, that will be quite painful. Those cells are not getting blood flow. When a cell doesn't get blood flow, a brain cell, it cannot give you messages. And the most important thing to know is that there's a behavior center over here. Whoever is putting out the most brain chemicals gets the prize. And the prize is control of your behavior. So if the craving chemicals are uppermost, then your behavior is like the zombie walk. You're walking to get the processed foods, even though the frontal lobe might be doing its best. No, no, no. The cravings won that day, or the stress pathways. Oh, I feel so bad. I need something to eat. There's a competition. There's a three-way competition for control of your behavior. Whoever gets to put out the most neurotransmitter, whoever is stimulated the most gets control of your behavior. That's the prize. And that's how it works.
So could stress and cravings just work on top of each other and just double the effect? If someone is stressed and then they're also going to, and they also have this physical addiction for food, And then it's like the control that's happening in the front is just, I feel like it's like there's no possible way that it can win with all of those,
Okay.
that activity.
Okay, there's no possible way it can win unless you have training, unless you have knowledge, unless you know how to protect yourself. So this is being very deliberately done to you. For example, TV programming is stressful. It's deliberately stressful, and it gets more and more stressful all the time. The things that are on TV right now, you would never have seen on TV in the 1950s and 60s, and vice versa. The things that were on TV in the 50s and 60s are so mild. By now, they can no longer stimulate those adrenal glands into stress, which then creates cravings. So it's a two-part, maybe three-part. Let's talk about three approaches to getting control.
Yeah, yeah.
Number one is I'm going to use a word here that's not commonly used, but the word is cue or cueing. What is a cue or a signal? It's a signal. It's a reminder. It's a trigger. It's stimulation. It's an advertisement. It's something that the food industry is deliberately doing to trigger that flood so that they will have control of your behavior. Okay, so number one, understand cueing, triggering, stimulation, reminders, etc. Now, part B of number one is to understand the concept of an associative cue, an associative trigger, an associative reminder. So maybe you have somebody that you regularly sit down and eat ice cream with, which is one of the most craving foods, or somebody that you eat pizza with, or somebody that you eat cookies with. Those are all highly, highly craving foods. Seeing that person, thinking about that person, getting an email from that person or a text from that reminds you of the person, and then you are reminded of the food, the craving food that you eat with them. So by association, that person's not eating. There's no processed foods around. You don't see it. But by association, that person is now in the service of the food industry as a cue, as a trigger, as an advertisement. Okay. So that's the first category of training, is how to recognize the cue and then how to adjust your life so that you are not letting your poor sensitive brain be exposed to those triggers. Okay, that's number one.
That's amazing. And I want to just add in a couple other cues that I think are very powerful, that I think that because people are, when they're in this situation, it's very understandable how it's so difficult to do it. So something as such a easy lifestyle aspect of going to the movies, right, and having popcorn. It's like most people can't think about not having popcorn. It's just,
that's a brilliant
happens.
example of associative cueing.
Yeah, even if you're healthy.
It's the movie. It's the being in a dark space. It's the smell. Movie theaters don't make any money off of the movie. They only make money off of their concession stand because they have a captive audience, stressful programming. All movies are stressful. They have to be, or else they're not entertaining. There has to be some kind of stressful something that is overcome or whatever. So it's a perfect, you capture this audience and then you cue the heck out of them.
Yes, and it's very hard for anyone to be in that situation until you learn alternatives. We're following many of the other powerful steps that you're going to share, but it's not easy to avoid that situation. Even if you're thinking, oh, I have the best intentions, I'm not going to do it, and then especially if you're with someone that's ordering it, I mean, then it becomes really hard. So yes,
yeah, this is something that is automatic in your brain. You can be sitting and watching television at home. Now they've cued your home, and the dopamine is just building up. And it could be something as small as it's available. So a processed food availability, I could just walk out to the kitchen and get it. That is enough to stimulate dopamine release. And so that dopamine is just building up, building up, building up, and building up until there's more of it than frontal lobe neurotransmitters. And boom, you're doing the zombie walk out to the kitchen.
Okay, this is so amazing. So cues and associative cues. Associative is like something you might not think about, but it's there and it's very powerful. So okay, this is exciting. So let's talk about the next one.
Okay. The next one is to find the hidden craving chemicals in your food. The tobacco industry extracted concentrate nicotine and then hid it in cigarettes to make them more craving, to increase the chances. So what the craving industries are going for, and this includes alcohol and cannabis and all the other addictive substances and screens, what they're going for is just to create more craving transmitters in your brain than frontal lobe transmitters. That's it. And television is hypnotic. You're in a trance when you're watching television. So your frontal lobe is pretty shut down when you're watching programming. Okay. Number two, then, is to recognize that this is not a sugar issue. So all these sugar-free and quit the sugar and kick sugar and sugar addiction, this is all total BS. There are hundreds of addictive substances in processed foods, and it includes sugar, any kind of sweetener, because now by association, you are triggering, you could be eating a piece of fruit, which is lovely and natural and should be okay. But if it's too high in sugar, it will create cravings. Your brain is so sensitive. They attacked children. They assaulted children with addiction programs. They took the Marlboro Country Store, which is an addiction business model, and they just took it lock, stock, and barrel and created the Kool-Aid Wacky Warehouse. Same model. So they attacked very small children. This is a deeply seated cravings system that has been trained into your brain cells. So it's not just sugar, but it's anything that tastes sweet. By association will trigger that flood. It's also flour. So this is a different pathway. It's a serotonin pathway. The gluten in the flour, it contains a gluteomorphine. So now you have the opioid pathway pumping out neurotransmitter. Excessive salt also impacts the opioid pathway. Now, when I say opioid, I know you're thinking opium. Oh, yeah. It's named after opium because opium activates this pathway. Dope is named after the dopamine pathway, or vice versa. These are drug pathways. So you have excessive salt has been shown to activate that opioid pathway, same pathway as opium. Dairy, deliberately, Mother Nature put 4 kinds of casomorphine in dairy so that when a baby mammal drinks it, they will go to sleep and absorb the nutrients. So dairy has enough casomorphine in it to put a 100-pound baby calf to sleep. It's highly addictive. And then fat, just recently in the University of Boston research, fat has been shown to activate the cannabinoid pathways, alter them profoundly. Cannabinoid is named after cannabis. So these are drug pathways. And when you repeatedly stimulate them by eating these substances, and then by association being cued for them, they will create floods. And it's another reason why this is such a deeply seated, stubborn, resilient craving experience. It's because if it were just alcohol, for example, you would just have a highly activated dopamine pathway. If you wanted to get off alcohol, yes, your dopamine pathway would have to make a lot of adjustments, but you would still have serotonin, you would have opioid, and you would have cannabinoid. But because all of the pathways have been depleted, altered, hyperstimulated, and now exhausted, when you go off these substances, when you go off of processed foods, all four of those pathways have to make big adjustments. So A number one is cueing. Number two is the food itself. And then you have caffeine, and then you have food additives. So of course these corporations are putting additives in the food to make them more craving. So you've got to be, and to me, you have to do this in a group. And that's actually number three, is how do you actually make this happen? So number two is you've got to clean up your food. You've got to remove the cueing that makes you think of the food. And the biggest thing you can do to start that is to make clean meals. You may not be able to give, because there are hundreds of substances. This is so diabolical that giving up all of those substances at one time could be completely unrealistic. And so these groups where you walk in and say, okay, well, you can't talk until you're abstinent, or you're eating this food plan all the time. That is cruel. That is cruel. The skill set, this is a skill set of being able to produce food reliably, or be able to comb through restaurants. Like, I went out for brunch the other day with my daughter and my granddaughter. I got on the internet before we went. They wanted to go to a vegan restaurant, which has got more limited choices. And I studied that menu up and down and backwards and sideways until I found the one dish that I thought would work. And then I had to figure out, it was I don't want to say the word, but I had to figure out a substitution for the processed foods, and I figured out exactly how to order it. So I wouldn't have to open the menu, or I wouldn't have to try to think. Restaurants are deliberately engineered with a lot of noise so that you can't think, so that your brain gets revved up and you order a lot of food. So I know that that's part of my training, is to look up the restaurant beforehand, get the menu out, and make my food decision before I've left my house. My house is all cued for rational thought, understanding the consequences, being in touch with the pain, and I am totally safe in my house. So make that decision in my house before I get to the heavily cued, manipulative environment of the restaurant. That's the kind of thing, that's a kind of training. And there's just thousands of situations like that, where if you know what to do, you're safe. But if you don't know what to do, they gotcha.
Yes.
All right, number three.
Yes.
I know we're running out of time.
This is one of the biggest ones, right? Like, well, they're all big. They're all very important, all very key.
You need to just gradually over time develop all of these. This is years and years of practice. I've been in this field for 27 and a half years. I'm still gaining skills. Mm-hmm. The manufacturers, the neuroscientists, they're constantly thinking of new ways to manipulate me, and I'm constantly developing new skills to protect myself against them. So number three is the biggest, and actually I would start here. And that is the people around you. So we have this incredible system of brain cells, and they're all throughout the brain, They're everywhere in the brain. And they make sure that we fit in. Why? Because whether you're a creationist or an evolutionist, if you were in a tribe, you lived, and if you weren't, you died. So we don't have fangs, we don't have huge muscles, we don't have bulk, we don't have claws, we can't run as fast as a cheetah, and we can't, smack down somebody like an elephant could. We don't have that. But what we do have is groups. So if you have a group of 7 or 8 people, and they have spears and they have rocks, and they can run at something as a group, you live. You will be protected by a predator. Our brains are constantly assessing what group is available, because that is how, if you're an evolutionist for 7 million years, that's how we lived. If you're a creationist, that's how we were created in order to live. Our protection is being in a group. So our brains are constantly looking around. What is the group? What's a group? Who's around? What people are around? And what are they doing? And how can we fit in? Because if you don't fit into your group, they're not going to protect you. You're an outsider. So you harness that group. You harness that part of the brain. These are called mirror neurons, because they are literally a mirror. They take what they see, what's coming in, and they mirror it into your brain, and your brain cells follow that image. So that is why we have the online community that we have. We can take anybody in the world with an internet connection. Right now, it's all in English. And we can create a mirror of healthy behavior. So if you're mirroring people who are eating processed foods, your brain will not let you escape from processed foods. But if you're around people who don't eat them, your brain will not let you eat the processed foods. And this is how this manifests. So I have two great stories about those. I'll just tell them real quick. We had a new member come in. She had just spent friggin' $4,000 on a 12-week program that she couldn't follow. Okay, so she comes into the Addiction Reset community, which we're thinking about renaming ACT, Rebuild, Connect, because that's really what we're doing in there. We don't want to think of ourselves as having an addiction. We want to think of ourselves as people who are powerful in all circumstances. Okay, so that's just a little aside. So she comes in, and the first day she does well during the day. That's her typical pattern. Her family's got some desserts out in the kitchen, and she goes out there and she says, well, we understand. We are incredibly patient. We never tell people they've done anything wrong, because they haven't. And so she says, well, I'm not going to get in trouble if I eat this dessert. She eats the dessert. Same thing on Tuesday. On Wednesday, now we do 15 to 17 hours a day of live Zoom meetings. So she's been playing it in the background, and her brain has been playing, who's around, what do they do, which is what brains are doing all the time. And the brain came to this conclusion: oh, we're in a new tribe, and they don't eat that stuff. So on Wednesday, she goes into the kitchen, she looks at the dessert, and this new voice comes on in her head and says, I could eat that, but I don't want to. Mm-hmm. Now, the other story is much briefer. This is a person who, every time she went into the kitchen for decades, would have a battle in her head. Oh, should I eat the bad stuff in the refrigerator, or should I make a clean meal? And she was just tired of the battle. So after about 5 days, this happened on a Friday, she started on Monday, she went into the kitchen, and the voice in her head said, I want to eat a clean meal. And there was no mirroring of no, eat what's in the refrigerator. So she just calmly, no battle in the head, went over and made a clean meal. That is what happens when the people you see the most, and we've made it very easy in our community to see people. These are all of our hours are hosted by trained people, to be among people who are eating clean, who are thinking positive, who are calm in all situations. So we're not just teaching the food, we're teaching all of the associative cueing strategies, all the emotional management strategies, all the food production strategies. There's a lot of skills that go into being safe. And of course, when you're not eating those foods, you're eating a lot of fiber, you're eating full portions. We have a whole how to create a custom food plan training. Then you are eating the food that works for you. And you know how to tell if you're getting a little bit too excited about something and just like, not going there.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is so powerful. And also, I feel like the last one is something a little bit unexpected in terms of being so important, that it is about the people around you. And, there's that saying that many people have heard, which is like you're the average of the five people around you. And this is more specific into making decisions for your health, for your weight loss, for your goals that you have for yourself, in that if those voices aren't speaking to you, it's just easy to go with what's right in front of you. And I think it's very important to call out as well that Dr. Joan, you've mentioned that these are virtual communities, like
Mhm.
versus being around the physical people who are around. Sometimes you don't have as much control over that, and you don't have as much time to go and seek that out. But if as long as the voices are speaking in your head, and it could be something virtual that you're part of, which is so doable and easy,
Yeah.
much more realistic to add into your life, that counts. Like that's very powerful as a community. So that's amazing. So I just want to recap those three for those that are listening. So the first, and these are really ways to overcome your cravings, right? Like to achieve, like to help you reach your goals, overcome cravings. So the first is cues, and then also associative cues is a subset of that. And then the next one is food, and then also the ingredients in food, and like caffeine, alcohol, other aspects of that. And then community, so and really associating yourself around that. So these are three really important aspects in learning. The education, like you said, could actually help your brain function differently, so
It
that you're
does.
not, yeah, so that you're not at the mercy of these of this activity that's happening in your brain, which can feel very hopeless if that's all that you're relying on. It's like getting out of that. So one more question I want to ask you is, given that we know this information, like if people continue to eat the level of processed foods that they're eating, but maybe like a little bit healthier, or they've kind of try to go on in their journey to weight loss or getting healthier on their own, like what are some of the repercussions of that? Like what could happen if people feel like it's just too hard to make these changes, or they've tried to make these changes but they haven't found the right roadmap to get there, and it just feels easier to just do what they're doing? Like what could be the result of that?
Well, you'll be sick. So 93% of Americans have high triglycerides, glucose, blood pressure, cholesterol, or waist to hip ratio. So the thing that's really cool about getting off of processed foods is how quickly you start to feel better. So the brain fog lifts, and the confusion lifts, and the bloating lifts, and the cravings lift. It can happen in as little as 4 days. Typically, it's 4 days, and it could be longer in some cases. So that one of the big consequences is you miss the fun. It's so fun. It's so fun to go in the doctor and say, "Oh yeah, check my cholesterol," and then the doctor takes you off medications. Oh, that's really fun. Your personality, as I mentioned, changes. It's really fun to be happy. It's really fun to have functioning feel good pathways. It's really fun to not be stimulating stress all the time. It's really fun to learn what a wonderful person you are. So all these processed foods and all the cueing and the negativity and these corporations are deliberately stimulating negative emotions so that you'll get those cravings. So it's to live a life where your head is full of positive thinking. Oh my gosh, it's just so much fun. So I think the biggest concept, and of course, all your physical stuff clears up. Processed foods cripple cell function. So it's not just any one thing that could clear up. I mean, go into remission. We have a whole new community called the Remission Optimistic Community, because we noticed over these 5 years of having the processed food community that a bunch of things were clearing up. So we said, well, why not encourage people to put, fatty liver and diabetes and irritable bowel and depression and anxiety, joint pain, even cancer or heart disease. Why not create a community where people can get support for putting disease into remission? So we have a whole new website, Remission Optimistic now, So I think the biggest consequence, I mean, you can go negative. You can say, oh, only 3% of the country, the US, has nothing, no disease. Or 1.6 million people will die from processed foods this year, diet-related diseases. You can go negative, but I think it's really the incentive is it's such a fun life.
Absolutely. Yes. Oh, I love how you're saying, I love how you are sharing this because there's so many benefits to completely getting off of processed food and like really not really having it except for certain moments when it's very hard to avoid. Really keeping it out, it keeps everything so much healthier, so much cleaner, and it also can taste really good and you feel so good all the time.
Yes,
So
yes.
yes, it is absolutely fun. I completely agree. Oh my gosh, Dr. Joan, I could ask you so many more questions. This has been really, really such a valuable
This is a
conversation.
great one. Nagina, you're really a gifted interviewer. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I so appreciate that. Well, I love this discussion and it's helping so many people to dig into what's going on and why it's about taking a different approach, not doing the same thing more and more and harder, which hasn't been working.
Right.
So Dr. Joan, you have a really amazing free gift for our audience that I'd love to talk about and then to share where others can find you and follow you. All
Good.
the links
Yes,
are
please.
below as well. Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead and describe that free gift if you like.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So you are going to be giving us a very special subset of the food, like the food addiction. One of your pieces of work, one of your books, like a free gift for
Okay.
that.
All
So,
right. So I just thought maybe you remembered what I talked
oh
about.
no,
So
no, I
I think
haven't.
for
Yes.
this interview, it's an excellent interview. I would like to offer a few videos. Videos are much more easy to watch again and again and really get the information from. So I have a video specifically on cravings. I would really also like to offer a video that explains the whole story of the tobacco industry and their addiction business model. It's actually a two-part video. One is the tactics that they used against us, and the second part is the impact on our brains, the hyperactive craving pathways, the hyperactive stress pathways, the hypoactive frontal lobe. So I would like to offer you guys, I'm so grateful to have been here, cravings video, tobacco tactics as applied to food, and the impact on our brains, so that you will really realize that this was done to you. This is not your fault.
Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. Thank you for this incredibly valuable gift. 3 videos to walk us through what we've talked about in even more detail, and they're video workshops. And so the link is right below. I definitely urge you to grab that and to check this out. And then, Dr. Joan, how can others follow you and find out more about the research you're doing, the work that you're doing, and find out, where are you most active?
So the best thing to do to get involved is go to processedfoodaddiction.com and take the self quiz. So there are 11 signs of addiction. One of them is cravings, and you will see for yourself what was done to you. But you'll also have an opportunity to leave your email address, and then you can tell us, I'd like to be invited to a workshop for these cravings. I want to get over them. Or I think there's a place where you can also say, no, I have a disease I'd like to put into remission. Or we offer training. So if you're a professional, like I want the tools for my clients, or you're a layperson, you're just like me, I'm not a trained professional, I'm a researcher, you can learn how to be a part of our communities and help other people. Or if you have somebody in your life who cannot give up the processed food, somebody you love who's sick or even dying, you can train on how to help them.
Oh my gosh,
Uh,
amazing. Amazing. Okay, and we have those links below. Check those out. Dr. Joan, thank you for sharing so many years of experience and research, and everything you shared about the business model of addiction is
Oh
so
gosh.
fascinating. And like you actually said, this is a psychological attack. This is something like and I can see how angry you are because of all of the effects that this is having on millions and more people. So I can absolutely see that. And when you have personally gone through the journey of overcoming it, you could see, how we've been really manipulated.
It's
So
terrible.
yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah,
you got the
yeah.
word out. Everybody, it's, if you to walk away from this with one idea, this is not my fault, and oh, it is the processed foods.
Yes, yes. And that there it's so fun. Like you said, it's so fun to find the
That's
way to get
fun.
over this. Yes,
Ah,
absolutely. Thank
yeah.
you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Nagia. I just appreciate you so much. Nagina. It's a beautiful name. It's like a poem in one word. And I'm sorry I've gotten it wrong. Nagina, thank you.
Thank you.